Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving deep into one of the most powerful and, let's be honest, one of the most debated chapters in all of ancient literature, Revelation chapter 7. We're going to try to move past some of the common assumptions and really deconstruct its symbols and its historical context to get at its original meaning. So, let's just jump right in by framing our whole analysis around the big question, the one that scholars have been wrestling with for centuries. Is the book of Revelation a literal roadmap to the future, a kind of cosmic schedule of events? Or is it something else entirely? A coded, symbolic letter of hope written for a specific, persecuted community way back in the 1st century?
To really unpack that, we're going to follow a pretty clear path. First, we have to ground ourselves in the historical world that actually produced this text. Then we'll get into the heart of the chapter, the visions of the sealed and the great multitude. From there, we'll decode its most important symbol, the divine seal. And that will lead us right into the big debate, history or prophecy. Finally, we'll wrap it all up by talking about the chapter's main job, to deliver a message of hope. Okay, first things first. It's absolutely crucial to get this. Revelation wasn't written in a vacuum. It belongs to a very specific genre of writing called apocalyptic literature. Now, this style of writing, full of wild visions, super dense symbolism, and this black and white worldview, it almost always pops up in times of intense crisis. It is crisis literature, written to a community that felt like its very existence was on the line.
And what was that crisis? What was that existential threat? Well, for the first readers of Revelation, it was the Roman Empire. Now, we have this image of Rome as this constant, monolithic machine of persecution, but the reality was actually a little more complicated. Rome was generally tolerant of old, established religions. The problem was, they saw this new Christian movement as something very, very different and pretty dangerous.
And this slide really gets to the heart of the friction. See, Rome's policy was basically this. You can keep your own gods, no problem, as long as you also participate in the state cult. That meant offering sacrifices to the Roman gods and, crucially, to the emperor. For strict monotheists, this was a non-starter. And while Judaism was mostly given a pass as an ancient tradition, Christianity was seen as this new, illegal upstart. And here's the kicker. For Rome, religion wasn't just personal belief. It was civic duty. Refusing to sacrifice wasn't just a theological disagreement. It was seen as an act of political defiance. You're being a bad citizen.
So you can see why this text was so needed. It's fundamentally a pastoral response. It's a work of theological resistance. It's designed to completely reframe reality for its audience, to tell them, hey, I know the Roman state looks all-powerful, but there is a higher, divine plan at work. It's arguing that their suffering isn't random, and that ultimately they're protected by a power much, much greater than Caesar.
All right, let's move into the vision at the heart of chapter 7 and see how John the author actually builds this sense of hope using imagery. He presents these two back-to-back visions of the saved, and it all starts with one of the most famous and frankly misunderstood numbers in the entire Bible, 144,000.
Now, of course, some groups have interpreted this number literally, as in a precise, limited number of people who get saved. But to read it that way is to completely misunderstand the genre. In Jewish apocalyptic writing, numbers are almost never about simple math. They are about theology. They're a kind of divine code. And 144,000 represents something way deeper than just a head count.
So how do we get this number? Well, it's actually a brilliant piece of symbolic math. You start with 12 for the tribes of Israel, the foundation of God's people. Then you multiply that by 12 again for the apostles, representing the new community of the church. That gives you 144, a number that symbolizes the complete union of the old and new covenants. And then you multiply that by 1,000, a number that in the Bible just means a huge, vast, complete quantity. The result, 144,000, isn't a literal number. It's a symbol of absolute, perfect totality. It means all of God's people, perfectly and completely accounted for.
And this is where John does something just brilliant from a rhetorical standpoint. Because right after he presents this vision of a symbolically complete Israel, the camera suddenly pulls way, way back. He sees a second group, a crowd so huge it is literally uncountable. And this crowd is made up of people from every single nation, tribe, and language on earth. The vision blasts open, from the specific to the universal, from the symbolically counted to the literally uncountable. It's a powerful statement that salvation isn't just for one group, it's for everyone. But what does it mean for these people to be sealed? This isn't just some passive description, it's an active divine intervention. The seal is the very thing that protects them through all the chaos that's about to be unleashed in the rest of the book.
The seal isn't a physical brand or a tattoo. Think about it like a wax seal on an ancient letter. That seal proved who it came from, and it protected what was inside. It was a sign of ownership. So here, the seal is a symbol that says, this person belongs to God. And because they belong to God, they get divine protection. Now here's the crucial point. The text suggests this is protection from the divine judgments coming on the world, not necessarily a magical force field protecting them from Roman persecution. It's a spiritual guarantee, not a physical one.
And this idea of being marked for God would have made perfect sense to the original Jewish Christian readers. It connects directly back to the Old Testament, where there's a command to bind God's law as a sign on their foreheads. That command led to the actual practice of wearing phylacteries, these little leather boxes with scrolls of prayer inside, worn on the forehead. So when John talks about a symbolic sealing on the forehead, he's using a metaphor for identity and belonging that was already deeply baked into their culture.
And John sets up this powerful, stark contrast throughout the book. Here in chapter 7, we get the seal from God. It's a mark of ownership that means protection. But later on, he introduces its opposite, the mark of the beast. That mark comes from the oppressive empire, and it shows your allegiance is to that system of injustice. The seal leads to salvation. The mark leads to judgment. It's the ultimate choice of allegiance, God or empire. So all of this, all these symbols so deeply rooted in a specific time and place, brings us right back to our big initial question. How are we supposed to read this book? Is it a prediction of the distant future, or is it a commentary on the author's present? This is really the fork in the road when it comes to studying Revelation, and each path leads to a totally different understanding of what the book is all about.
So one major scholarly view, it's often called the preterist interpretation, from a Latin word meaning past, argues that Revelation is primarily a book about the first century, period. In this reading, it's a piece of coded political protest, a powerful critique of the Roman Empire meant to give hope to the people suffering right then and there.
According to this view, most of the book's prophecies have already been fulfilled, and proponents point to some pretty compelling evidence, like the infamous number 666. Using an ancient Jewish practice called gematria, where letters have numerical values, the number 666 can be spelled out from the name Nero Caesar, the emperor who was the poster child for persecution. From this perspective, the beast is Rome, the Antichrist is the imperial cult, and all the disasters are just symbolic ways of describing the political chaos of the era. Now, this historical approach is in total contrast to what are called futurist interpretations. Futurists read the book as a largely unfulfilled prophecy, a literal roadmap of what's still to come. So while the historical view sees the book's fulfillment in the collapse of ancient Rome, the futurist view is waiting for a future global crisis, a literal antichrist, and a bunch of cataclysms that haven't happened yet. They're two completely different ways of reading the exact same words.
And here's something else we absolutely have to remember, the author's own mindset. Early Christian writers, like John and also the Apostle Paul, they wrote with this powerful sense of imminence. They really believed they were living in the last days of history and that the end of the age was going to happen very, very soon, probably in their own lifetimes. This context, this feeling that the end is near, it strongly suggests the book was an urgent message for their time, not a blueprint for 2,000 years later.
So, regardless of where you land on that debate, whether you see it as fulfilled history, future prophecy, or something else entirely, we have to ask, what is the ultimate function of this chapter? What was it designed to do for its first audience?
From a literary standpoint, its placement is just masterful. Chapter 7 acts like a divine pause button. It's an interlude right between the 6th and 7th seals, which unleash all this horrible judgment on the world. The action just freezes, and the author shows the audience a vision of the endgame. It's basically saying to its terrified readers, hey, before things get really bad, I want you to know this. You are seen, you are sealed, you are going to make it. Its main job was to provide comfort and assurance in the middle of terrifying chaos. And this promise, right at the end of the chapter's vision, it just sums up the whole point. It's this powerful guarantee to the faithful that their current reality, persecution, hunger, sorrow, even death, is not the final reality. It's a counter-vision of a future where all that suffering is finally healed by God.
And that is exactly why this ancient and, let's face it, very strange text continues to have so much power long after its original context has passed. Its core message, that even in the darkest times, when evil systems seem unbeatable, there is a promise of protection and ultimate redemption. That is a message that has offered deep comfort to people facing their own crises all throughout history.
So this leaves us with a final and pretty tough question to chew on.
If this text is, as a lot of scholarship suggests, a very specific response to a specific historical crisis, what does it mean for us to apply its message today? How do we ethically translate its symbolic language of cosmic war into our modern global context? What's the real value of ancient apocalyptic literature in a world that tends to look for solutions in science and politics, not necessarily in divine intervention?